In my previous job as a full-time content creator, we used the Rode Go 2 wireless mic system all the time. And recently I got sent the Hollyland Lark Max for review, and at approximately the same price as the Rode Go 2s, I've been really curious to know if they can actually compete. For a number of years now, the only real options you had when it came to a high quality wireless mic system was the Rode Go 2s or the DJI wireless mic system. And these two systems have been largely undisputed, in my opinion, as the two best options. But competition recently has been starting to heat up, which is only a good thing for us creators. So let's see if the Hollyland really does compete at the same standard. So the first thing I noticed when I opened up the package was the charging case. And this already, to me, gives big points to the Hollyland because the Go 2s just have no charging case. I used to hate having to charge these things. I have to plug them all into individual USB-C cables. So I'm really happy to see that the Lark Max does have a charging case, and it feels like a really high quality and solid case. Like, I wouldn't even be too worried about dropping this. I feel like the microphone system would be pretty well protected. As soon as you open the case, it'll tell you the battery life of the case and the mic system, which is a nice touch. Plus you've got 4 external LEDs for quick battery level reference for the case, which is nice. And you can charge the whole thing just with a single USB-C cable. So from there, let's move on to the actual build quality of the overall system. And in my opinion, when comparing them to the Go 2s, I think they actually do compete when it comes to build quality. The Hollyland system feels really solid, and I actually really like the kind of grippy exterior material that they've got both on the case and the transmitters and receiver, especially when comparing it to, again, the Go 2s. The Go 2s to me were super fingerprint prone because they've got that gloss finish, and so they often end up just kind of looking gross. Whereas the Hollyland has a matte finish, which also means you have more grip, which is nice. Now, I can't speak so much for the longevity of the Hollyland in terms of build quality because I've only had them for about a month, but I can't see any parts that I think would wear out quickly. It all seems really solid. Everything's either made from a high quality plastic or some type of aluminum metal. So let's move on to the external features of the Lark Max system, and let's look at the transmitters first. So on the transmitter, you've got a power button and a noise cancelling button, which also doubles as your pairing button. Then on the other side, you've got a record button so that you can record internally on the mic itself. And also very happy to see a lav mic input so you can plug in external microphones. And I'm always a big fan of this because using a lav is way more discreet than just plugging one of the transmitters onto your chest like I've got currently. On the back side, it's got that clip so you can clip it onto clothing, and it's also got a magnet, which I'm a big fan of because this just opens up so many more options than just a clip. For example, right now I can have it magnetized to my chest rather than having to clip it up on my collar, where it would probably be more awkward and wouldn't get as good sound quality. One thing to note is I did notice that the magnet already seems to be scratching the back of the clip where the Hollyland logo is. Obviously it's not going to affect the actual function of the mic, but I could well imagine over the course of a couple of years that's going to get really scratched up. And then lastly, on the bottom, it's got a USB-C port, which you can use for charging, firmware updates, and for accessing onboard recordings through your computer. And it's worth noting, you actually don't need to have the receiver switched on in order to record with the transmitters, which I think is a really useful feature. Then moving on to the receiver, this also has a power button, which doubles as a lock button so you can lock the menu from being accidentally touched. It's got a 3.5mm headphone jack so that you can monitor with headphones while you're recording. It's also got a USB-C port for charging, firmware updates, and you can also use this as an audio out for connecting to devices like laptops and mobile phones. It's got a really nice dial for menu navigation on the top, and then it's got a touch button on the far right side to go back through the menus. And you can see everything on a really nice clear color AMOLED display, which I'm a big fan of. It's all very well laid out and easily bright enough to be used in sunlight. Next, I'm just going to touch on some of the internal features of these mics. So both the receivers have 8 GB of internal storage, which equates to about 14 hours of record time. It records in 48 kHz, 24-bit audio. And 24-bit essentially just refers to the dynamic range of your audio. Cheaper wireless mics that I've used in the past record in 16-bit, for example, and the Rode Go 2s also record in 24-bit audio. The transmitter battery life is about 7.5 hours on a single charge, and you can obviously recharge it in the charge case for longer operation time. And it's also got that onboard noise cancellation feature, which I mentioned the button for earlier, and I'll show you some audio tests I've done with the noise cancellation feature in a minute. So speaking of testing, let's get into the actual audio quality of this mic system. And overall, I've honestly been super impressed with the Lark Max. Now, I'm not going to do a direct audio comparison to the Rode Go 2s because I don't currently own a pair. And there's also heaps of other YouTube videos out there that directly compare them. But I'm going to share my overall thoughts about the comparison between the Lark Max and the Rode Go 2s at the end of the video. But this whole video is obviously being recorded on the Lark Max. So feel free to leave a comment. Let me know what you think of how this video sounds, especially when you compare it to my standard videos, which are recorded on podcasting microphones. Now, just for reference, I have added some audio correction to this whole video. And this is what the mic sounds like when there's no audio correction applied whatsoever. So this is what it sounds like coming straight out of the microphone, going straight into my camera. And then this is how it sounds when I've added some basic EQ. And if you're interested in how I've EQ'd this mic, there's a link in the description with a video where I go through the whole process of how I EQ this mic in particular. Now let's talk briefly about the noise cancellation feature. To me, I wouldn't generally opt to use noise cancellation because I prefer the option to be able to EQ out noise myself in post, but I imagine it could definitely come in handy for the average user. And I've been really impressed. I've used noise cancellation features in other mic systems, and I find they overcorrect and it comes out sounding kind of digitized. But I think the Lark Max has a really nice balance. It doesn't fully cancel out all background noise so that it has to over-process the voice, and it just results in a slightly muffled voice with a much lower level of background noise. So this is what it sounds like just in my studio with the noise cancellation turned on. Obviously there's not much background noise in here anyway, but here's some examples of how it sounds with actual background noise. Okay, so here we are doing an outdoor test. A little bit of background noise, just some traffic and general park sounds. So I'm going to turn on the noise cancelling. And as you can see, it cuts out quite a bit of that background noise. And this is what my voice sounds like when it's coming through the microphone with the active noise cancellation turned on. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? And then again, with it turned off, that's what the environment sounds like with background noise. Next up, let's talk about some range tests that I've done. And Hollyland claims 250 meters line of sight, which is a very long way. And realistically, you're probably going to never need that kind of range on a wireless mic system. But I did do an outdoor test at my local park, and this is what happened. Now I'll do a range test. I'm going to walk away from the transmitter. And still. So as you can see, essentially what happened was when I got about 10 meters maybe away from the camera with my back turned, it just started to drop out and lose signal. However, anytime I turned around and faced the camera again, it reconnected and was able to transmit the audio signal pretty clearly. It's not that obvious. When I got all the way across the soccer pitch, as you can see, you can still hear me. In the real world, you probably never need a lav mic to be able to go this far. When I started walking back towards the camera, it established a pretty clear signal and didn't really have any issues as I walked back. So that's something worth noting. If there is anything blocking the line of sight between the mic and the transmitter, is going to cause interference. To me, a more realistic test was testing it inside my apartment through walls. And what I found was that if there was 1 or 2 walls between the transmitter and the receiver, it wasn't really an issue. There was still a really clear signal. There was no dropouts. It was perfectly fine. Maybe I'll test it through here. That's 2.5 walls. Let's see if that comes out. That's facing away from the transmitter. Once I got to about 3 to 4 walls between me and the receiver, that's when it started to drop out again. So I'd say that's probably more realistic if you're going to be using it indoors, especially if you're moving around with multiple people. You can feel pretty comfortable as long as you're staying fairly close to your subjects. All right, so just quickly, I just want to talk about some of the issues that I had with the Hollyland system. The first thing was that when I first got the kit, one of the mics I noticed had a high-pitched ringing sound, and Hollyland told me it was likely just a damaged internal part. And to me, that really isn't an issue. It was probably just a really unlucky coincidence that I happened to get a damaged mic, and I haven't heard of anyone else having that type of issue. Plus, Hollyland was super quick to just send me out a new one, so that was all good in the end. One other small thing was I'm not a huge fan of the windsocks included in the pack. I know they need to be on the larger side to block out wind noise, but these seem kind of just a little bit excessively big, and I can't really imagine scenarios where I'd want to have this in a shot just because it looks so obvious. And then lastly, I just wish that there was a place to store the 3.5mm cable or a USB-C cable or both in the charging case. That would be ideal, because currently you've got the carry case, which is where all the cables are stored, and then you've got the charging case. So it feels like a bit of a Russian doll situation where you have to open one case and then open another case. And it would be nice to just have everything in a single case that I could carry around with me without having to worry about two different items. So lastly, what's my overall take, and do I think these compete with the Rode Go 2s? I think for the average content creator, I would probably choose the HoloLens. But if you're a professional working videographer under high pressure situations, maybe I would opt for the Rode, maybe. To me, the HoloLens are just a much better, well-rounded package. They've got more features, got more intuitive controls. I didn't go in depth, but the menu system on the HoloLens is way simpler and way more intuitive than, frankly, the really confusing menu system on the Rode Go 2s. It's also got the charging case, which is a huge bonus and huge pro when comparing that to the Go 2s. And you've even got that extra feature of noise cancellation. If that's something that you think would come in handy for you, it's always nice to have as well, just as a backup. And in terms of audio quality, I think the HoloLens does compete. You could argue, depending on how well trained you are in audio, that maybe the Rodes have the edge. And I think the other things that the Rode Go 2s have got for them is that they've got a strong track record of reliability. Rode is a really high quality brand. So it ultimately might just come down to personal preference. But I think, especially if you're a beginner content creator, but you're wanting really high quality audio and ease of use, then again, I do think the HoloLens have the edge over the Go 2s. So there you go. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. And if you'd like to hear the difference between 24-bit audio recording and 16-bit audio recording, then check out this video here where I reviewed the Boya Link system, which is a 16-bit system. And I think you'll pretty clearly see the difference when you're willing to spend a bit more for high quality audio.